I couldn't sleep last night, so I wrote down 100 things I've learned over 7 years of scalping. In this video, I'm sharing my thoughts with you. And in return, please subscribe to this channel and let's get started right away. Since our day starts when we wake up, the first thing I wrote down is wake up and make sure your mind is clear. If you need to go somewhere, run errands, or do anything else, do all of that first and only then sit down to trade. Nothing should be done in a rush. Especially if you know you have to go somewhere in half an hour, don't enter a trade because you might end up closing an unnecessary loss or miss out on a profit you would have taken if you didn't have to leave. So keep your mind clear, no other tasks. If you didn't get enough sleep, take a day off from trading. If for some reason you only slept for 2 hours, you shouldn't sit down to trade. Either tough it out to avoid messing up your routine. Again, I'm sharing these things from my own experience, so my routine often gets disrupted. You know about my problem. And either I tough it out and go to bed on time to get my routine back on track, or I do my own thing, or I just go back to sleep, but in any case, I don't go trading. This has a huge impact, no matter how strange it may sound. Set yourself clear tasks for the day. And here, it's not just about certain situations, but about what your actual tasks are. If you spend the whole day trading, then that's your task for the entire day, and that's fine. If you have other things to do, again, this goes back to the first point. You should have this, then that, then strictly say 4 or 5 hours of trading, and then some other tasks again. Yes, it's always better to alternate. If you don't have any tasks, assign yourself some mandatory ones like I did. That's trading and activities on the platform. I have 2 regular tasks when I'm working. Set your loss limit before the trading day begins. In other words, you should know how much you can lose in a day and not exceed that amount. As soon as you hit that limit, God forbid, but it happens, you simply stop trading. Next, keep your desk organized. Absolutely essential. On my desk, there's only a cup of coffee and a keyboard with a mouse. Nothing else. I even made an entire video about how to fight laziness, and the main thing that helps me is keeping my workspace tidy. Absolutely essential. Essentially, your workspace is a reflection of what's going on in your head, so if your workspace is a mess, chances are your mind is too. It's better to turn off your phone, Telegram, and all those meme groups and the like. They're distracting, especially if you're actively scalping, not just trading marked setups, but if you're trading from the order book or chasing volatility, it's absolutely necessary to turn off anything that could distract you. Don't trade out of boredom. It's absolutely essential to learn how not to trade. There will be plenty of situations in the market, but just as many moments when it's better not to enter a trade. You don't see anything that fits your trading strategy, but you jump in anyway. This often happens out of boredom, especially for beginners. And remember the main point, the first thing that will bring you closer to being profitable is learning not to trade. This is important. Before you start trading, always check the economic calendar. I often see questions in the chat like, what happened, what's going on? I check and it turns out to be some news-driven spikes. People start looking for the reasons behind these spikes. But it's simple. Someone made a statement, something got rug pulled, some news came out, and that's it. So just as a basic rule, keep an eye on the economic calendar, the Fed, any rate hikes or cuts, meetings, speeches by the Fed chair. Watch for these events, and around those times either trade only your marked levels or just take a break. I don't enter a trade if I don't understand why, and here we're talking about a situation you've just noticed. Often, I open the charts, see a familiar pattern that looks interesting at first glance, and immediately jump into the trade. Then, once I'm already in the trade and the rush has passed, I start analyzing and realize that beforehand there was a small stop hunt, no round number, low volumes, and so on. But visually at first glance, it looks appealing on the chart. First, we determine why, for what reasons, and only then do we enter. Don't rush. Keep in mind that there will be many more such opportunities, and much more reliable ones. I always know where I'll exit with a stop loss. And this, in principle, is the most important rule. In other words, we open trades based on where our stop will be. If it's too far away or it's not clear at all where to set it, it's better to skip this trade. The next thing I wrote, I always know where to take profit. But in reality, here you need to know the first target. The one where we'll at least take partial profit and move the stop to break even. So, if the stop is what we should base our decision to open or not open a trade on, then in a trade with a reasonable potential where you can take partial profit, move your stop to break even, and maybe let the rest run, you can do that. And that's why you need to determine at least one target. And if, according to your strategy, the risk to reward ratio allows you to enter, then you open the trade and know where you'll take at least your first partial profit. Even better is to know where you'll close the entire position. If there isn't a clear reason to open a particular trade, then I simply wait. Here, the point is that if there aren't any grounds according to your strategy, or if they're insufficient, but the coin is moving well, you just keep waiting. And again, this is about the ability to be patient. Yes, if you know how to wait for the right setups, you're probably very close to making a profit. There are just a few things left to refine. Check your position size before entering. I've had situations where I lost money, not much, but still. Unjustifiably, either because I left orders open or used the wrong size. And in a rush, I would open trades with the wrong volume or leave orders pending. This is a point about being attentive. Don't change your trade size based on emotions. And here, of course, we're talking about trying to win back losses. Yes, for example, when we hit a stop loss on the first leverage, then again and again, at some point we start increasing leverage to try to recover all the losses in a single trade. Often, this can be fatal for your deposit. I'll say it again, don't increase your position size after a stop loss. Don't open a bunch of trades at once. Often there are several coins on the market that we're watching, and they don't always play out at the same time. But trying to handle a bunch of situations at once, okay, one or two, if they're really suitable, that's fine. But trying to throw a lot of volume into different coins at the same time, I'm speaking from experience here, never leads to anything good. There are days when we work with several coins at the same time, but more often we focus on just one coin, and in practice this approach proves profitable over the long run. One setup, 2 or 3 attempts. These are situations, for example, when we catch a breakout and then it goes for another breakout after a false move. In other words, in every situation, you need to determine how many attempts you allow yourself. Because if you increase the number of attempts to work a situation, it often leads to that very tilt. When you take a lot of small stops on a single setup, and in the end it either moves without you or doesn't go anywhere at all, but you end up taking an unjustifiably large number of stops. That's why 2 or 3 attempts, personally I allow myself 3. If I go for more, I realize I'm not in the right state of mind, so I just step away from the computer. So it's one stage and a certain number of attempts. Decide for yourself how many, whatever feels comfortable for you, but a lot depends on the volumes you're trading with. So it's individual here. After each trade, take a pause and exhale. This doesn't always work. Often, on active days, we have several trades working out, one after another. Here, as I wrote it, though I don't remember exactly what I had in mind at the time, but now I can say that you've worked through your situations. You don't need to immediately start searching for or forcing other setups that you hadn't marked in advance. So if you've worked through what you had marked, take a pause and then wait for some new formations to develop. They won't just fall from the sky onto you right away, you know. And after new formations have developed, that's when you sit down again to work through them. Often this actually happens the next day. Many people, after they've worked through their setups, especially if they've done so profitably or with a bigger loss, that is, there's positive tilt and negative tilt, right? So no matter what the result is after working through your setups, take a break and then after a few hours start looking for new ones. If you took a loss, first take a walk, relax and then analyze. You don't need to analyze right away and try to jump back into the market to fix the situation. So if you hit your stop losses, take a breath, rest for 10 minutes. You don't need 3 or 5 days off if it's just a loss. But if it's some kind of tilt, then it's better to take a longer break, of course. But if it's just stop losses, then take a short breather and then analyze. Don't try to do everything right away. Your emotions need to settle a bit. I don't take revenge on the market for stop losses. Again, this is about chasing losses. But for some people it really sounds like the market took from me, so I'll get it all back. And often this can be critical again. I don't chase after missed opportunities. This is about when a coin is being pumped and for some reason we try to jump in at the top thinking it will keep pumping without us. And in this situation, when you've missed your opportunity, another one often appears, either to catch a falling knife, a pullback, or to wait until a new setup forms and then take the next breakout. But in no case should you just jump in at the top chasing the continuation. So don't jump onto a departing train. Mark your best trades. The best trade of the day, of the week. This is part of reviewing your trades, and you should create a folder where you keep your best setups. I used to do this at the beginning, I haven't for a long time now, but still. This way you end up with a folder of setups that are very, very high quality. It's a kind of mini challenge for yourself, but it's very useful in the long run, in the end, yes. So you open the folder and there are a bunch of setups that We look for patterns in the market, not tricks. This point is very important. That is, when you watch a lot of videos on YouTube, there are so many titles that supposedly offer some magic pill or secret, right? There is no secret in the market. We often work through the same thing over and over, and you just need to be able to wait for it and execute. So you find it, wait for it, and execute. There are no tricks or secrets. It's just systematic, routine work. Record your trades on video and also keep a journal. Well, I think that's basic, there's no need to explain it here. The journal keeps itself perfectly well, but you should record your trades yourself and not be lazy about it. Also, create a folder with your best trades and your worst ones. Don't hold on to positions just because you're afraid to close them. Often, a small loss turns into a big one and then into a catastrophic one. All of this happens because we're afraid to close at a loss. Losses are a part of our trading. They simply have to be there, they will happen, and there's no way around it. And often those who hold on to losing positions, I'm the same. There were times in the beginning, when you hold on and the thought process is simple. A small loss, you think it'll bounce back and go your way. A bigger loss, you start hoping it'll at least get back to break even. A catastrophic loss, you ask yourself, why didn't I close when it was just minus 10% of my deposit? Same here. That's why you should just close at minus 2% of your deposit and forget about that situation. Don't put yourself in a position where you're just hoping for even a small loss. Don't trade if your mind is preoccupied with personal issues. All of this relates to our psychology. And psychology is 80–70% of success. And in fact, maybe someone will say I'm wrong and it's 50–50, and that's also true, yes. But nevertheless, if we keep ourselves under control psychologically, it's much more profitable than just having a strategy. Because neither a strategy works without psychology, nor does psychology work without a strategy. But if you have a solid psychological approach, it's much harder for you to lose money than in a situation where you have a solid strategy but a weak psychological approach. Don't expect miracles from the market. And here the point is that you need to pay attention to the character of the coins. If a coin is always moving sideways, you shouldn't expect it to suddenly make big moves just because you entered a position. If a coin is moving sideways, leave it alone if that's not your style. Don't expect that the coin will suddenly bring you profit right here and now. This is a common mistake. I've analyzed many people's trades and saw that in a sideways trading coin, they were expecting some kind of strong breakout and even waited for it to break out of the sideways range and then didn't close the trade, hoping it would suddenly shoot up further. If it hasn't shot up for a year, it won't shoot up for you either. Don't move your stop loss out of hope. Some people remove it altogether, while others keep moving it again and again. Of course, it's better to move it a little than to remove it completely. But ideally, if the trade doesn't work out, you'll have a failed setup that you can analyze. If you constantly move or remove your stop losses, you won't even be able to gather a batch of trades to analyze. In other words, if you keep breaking the rules everywhere, you won't be able to make any adjustments to your strategy. Your task is to collect trades, whether they're losses or gains, with your entry point, your stop loss, and your executed profit. And only when you do everything the same way will you be able to make adjustments. But if you have chaos, then there's nothing to adjust. So the next rule I wrote right away: if you make a mistake, admit it, don't ignore the fact. Basically, removing your stop loss means ignoring your mistake and hoping the market will forgive you. The next point is that if you make a profit by breaking the rules, that's negative reinforcement. You'll get used to doing this all the time, hoping that things will keep going your way. In the end, sooner or later, at best you'll suffer a bigger loss, and at worst you'll get liquidated. Any loss is a reason to become better, not worse. Here the point is that you often remove your stop loss or don't set it at all because you're afraid of being wrong. You don't need to be right or wrong, you need to make money. And a stop loss is a point where you can pause and analyze the trade. And if you don't set it and just keep butting heads with the market like that, then you won't have anything to analyze or correct. Again, I'm referring back to the previous points, so don't be afraid of being wrong. Your goal should be to make money, not to prove you're right. And your mistake is simply an extra opportunity to analyze and fix it. There's nothing to be afraid of. Don't keep changing your strategy all the time. A lot of people watch tons of videos on YouTube, right? I make videos, lots of other people make videos, and someone watches here, then goes there and immediately tries this, that, and the other. Please make up your mind, and this applied to me as well. When your head is a mess, there's too much information. You try everything and nothing works. Pick one approach, trade with it for a week, and then you can make adjustments. But don't change your trading strategy 3 times a day. If you have doubts or a bad feeling about a situation, just stay out of it. Often, without even realizing it, Your body has analyzed the situation and is giving you a signal that you shouldn't get involved. If you have really strong doubts, you simply shouldn't open the position, just skip it. And from my personal experience, I can say that this often saved me and kept me from getting stopped out in many similar situations when I felt like something was off. It looks good, but something just isn't right. Don't be afraid to lock in small profits. And here, the main thing is to understand the phases of the market, right? Often, at the moment when I'm recording this video, of course, you shouldn't be locking in small profits. You should try to let them run. The market is giving good opportunities. There will come a time in the market when you'll see a small bit of green and then it will roll back into the red. That will happen often. And so in the current market phase, when altcoins are surging, you need to be taking profits. The next point is, don't compare yourself to other traders. Here, we're mostly talking about chat groups, right? Of course, you should aim for profit, but you shouldn't look at screenshots of other people's trades and then try to jump into the market just because of that. So really, there's nothing more to add here. You don't need to look at anyone else. You have your deposit, you have your own strategy, and you should stick to that and grow your deposit steadily and in a balanced way, without trying to jump in all at once. There are a lot of examples right now, especially with young people who are putting millions into the market. That doesn't mean you have to do the same. Just look at my own journey on YouTube. I showed up for you when I had a 10,000 deposit, right? And after say 4 years, I'm already trading with over 100,000. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't care what was happening around me. That's why I recommend you move at the same pace, because when you try to accelerate quickly, your losses can be just as fast and painful. Move carefully. The main thing is that your strategy and psychology work. Your deposit will grow. One tab, one instrument or time frame. This is necessary so that, again, everything doesn't flicker before your eyes. I'm speaking from my own experience. I see guys with a lot of charts open at once. If that's convenient for you, go ahead, but I've written down what I think, and that's why I have one tab for one instrument, the order book and the chart. That's it. If you need to work on something else, open a new tab by all means. But as long as you're monitoring a situation and want to work it out, that's how I do it. I do less and get more results. This is about only working with the situations you've identified and not getting involved in others at the same time until you've finished with these. In other words, the less I started poking around, the more profit I made, because there were fewer small stop losses from trying here and there. When your deposit is large, all those let me try here, let me try there, add up to $1,000. Why do that when you can just wait and take a stop for a couple hundred or make a couple thousand? If everything annoys me, I don't trade. Sometimes you get into a mood where even the way someone walks by just irritates you. You shouldn't trade in that state. In that case, you'll be clicking the mouse without thinking at all. And from the previous point, don't trade for quantity, only for quality. Again, about looking for the right setup. Your trading endeavors should genuinely be approached as a professional job, not merely some kind of speculative search for fleeting luck or chance. Luck is necessary, but you shouldn't rely on it. You should rely on your trading, on setups you find, according to your own strategy. Every day is a chance to start over. And this doesn't mean that you should have reset everything yesterday and start again today with no money. The point is, if you had losses yesterday, today is a new day. Your previous trade shouldn't affect your next one. You need to approach every new trade with a clear mind. This is very important. All decisions should be made with your own head and hands. If someone drops a signal in a chat somewhere, or I post something on a channel, you don't need to rush and act on it. Again, if your goal is to learn and become a trader, even if you see a situation, you should look at it, assess it, and see how it fits the criteria of your trading strategy. Only then, if everything fits and you agree with it, should you open a position. But if you just see a signal and rush to open a trade, what's the point of that? And here I wrote this point. A losing streak is a celebration of self-control. You shouldn't get upset if you have a series of losses. Why? Because you were able to set a stop loss. That's actually a plus. What's bad is when you have a string of green trades, and then one red one wipes out your whole deposit. That's what's bad. But if you have 5 stop losses in a row, that's not a big deal. Only open trades that you are confident in. And if you've opened a trade, don't second guess yourself. Here we're talking about how, during a trade, we watch the candlesticks, the order book, and all of that sways back and forth, dragging our mood along with it. I open a trade, I sit and wait. Either it plays out or it hits the stop loss. The only exceptions are if you see volumes going against you or something else. Otherwise, the trade needs room to breathe. I always say you need to let the trade breathe, especially if it's a trade with good potential. That's it. But if you open the order book and just sit there worrying, then close the trade. You need to enter a trade and be confident in what you've done. Again, going back to the previous points, if you close trades just because you're scared, you won't have anything to analyze, you'll just be creating chaos. You need to wait either for your targets or your stop losses. The next point is, don't increase your position size if you can't trade successfully with small volumes. For some reason, people get the idea that if they can't make it with $100, but if they had 1,000, they'd somehow trade more carefully in parts. That's not how it works. If you can't do it with 100, you won't be able to do it with 1,000 or even 10,000. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. You'll just lose it. So either you grow your deposit through a solid trading system and proper psychology, which will bring your deposit into profit in any case, or you simply wait and keep learning until you start succeeding. The next point is sharing your results. And in this regard, I chose YouTube, of course. Here, if I want to, I share my opinions. If I want to, I share my results. Well, I mean my own channels. You can do this in a community, but for me it's strange to post my results in someone else's chat. If I work something out, I shared a trade, sure, but for me it's a bit weird, I feel kind of awkward. Maybe for someone else it's fine, that's what communities are for, right? Maybe inside the community it's normal. I decided to create my own. Basically, I openly recommend everyone to run their own channels these days. It's important. And the easiest idea is just to show your journey. For example, you can do what I do, film, try to come up with ideas, try to make it interesting. Everyone has their own way. At first I just made tutorials. I shared what I knew myself, that's it. And in doing so I built up my own community. The choice is yours.